Welcome to the Submissive Leadership Podcast, where we show you how God can bring two people together to accomplish things they could never do apart through a biblical marriage.
We're your hosts, Dr. Trevor and Stephanie Huber. We have been married for 14 years and in business together for 7. We are lifelong learners of God, His Word, and each other. Join us as we navigate the principles of submissive leadership in both marriage and business.
Hey, Submitted Leaders, we are so excited to talk to you today about the difference between arrogance and confidence. The goal here is to try to identify the difference between the two when you are thinking about yourself and making sure that you're exploring blind spots in your own tendencies and then identifying it in others. Maybe if you're engaging in a partnership in business or you're looking to employ someone.
When you are entering into any business or partnership, you have to have confidence in that partnership, whether it's marriage, whether it's parenting, or whether it's a business. But you have to walk that fine line between confidence and arrogance. Arrogance gets you burned. Confidence leads you to heights that you never thought you could achieve.
Biblically speaking, when you think about confidence and the difference, I think the number one biblical difference between confidence and arrogance is as a leader, as a confident spouse, as a confident partner, and a confident employer, you have to evaluate the fruit that you're bearing in that role. If you're struggling to find the fruit that is, a derivative of that confidence or that arrogance, it really will be telling to you of whether you're acting in arrogance or if you're acting in confidence.
I think is a good key indicator of arrogance versus confidence is vulnerability. The confident, submitted leader is vulnerable. The arrogant leader lacks vulnerability. That's a good way to judge yourself on whether you are being confident or whether you're going into arrogance.
I think some things that we kind of broke down when we thought about the difference between the two is that arrogance leaves you blind to your shortcomings. You're not always aware of how you could be wrong. That's a pretty big red flag of saying, I may be walking in arrogance. A submissive leader explores their failures, they meditate on them, and they're not afraid to really sit on them, work through them, and try to do better next time when they fail. An arrogant leader will continue to make that same mistake over and over and over again. And a submitted leader can be confident in what they're doing, confident in living out their calling and doing what they need to do to get the job done, or confident in their marriage, but they are not afraid of being under a microscope. They're not afraid of critique, and they're not afraid of self-evaluation.
A confident leader that leads from what we would say is Godfidence. You're getting your confidence from God's calling in your life. I think the fruit that it bears is a fruit of teamwork, of having teammates around you, having people that are equally yielded with you to where you have a group that you can go to bounce ideas off of, you can go to get critiques and criticisms. I think it's a big thing when you're confident to actively look for criticisms and critiques, not cynicism. There's a big difference between somebody who's cynical about everything you do, and they're never going to believe in anything you do. You don't need any of that negativity. In fact, that person probably is more arrogant in the way that they view you, is that they're just cynical towards you. But somebody who is willing to give you constructive criticism, that helps build your confidence. It helps build my confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've even wrestled with the concept of it's lonely at the top. Leaders are isolated and they're lonely. And I think the only thing they're isolated in is the uniqueness of their calling and what they've been asked to do. That is what may be lonely. But if you're not surrounded by a team of people, mentors, people that you can glean from, then that's a red flag. That's you probably walking on the line of arrogance.
I agree. I think whenever I am faced with certain types of challenges or hurdles, or, whenever I get kicked in the gut and I'm facing a failure, I look at 3 different areas of people that I know mentor me. One is professional, one is spiritual, and then I think one is just relationship with you. I know that from an emotional standpoint, I have confidence that you love me for who I am. You don't love me because of any type of resume that I brought or any type of scoreboard that I have. That gives me an immense amount of confidence. That was a big part of why I asked you to marry me and didn't wait until I was accepted into medical school. Because when we were going through that stage in our life and I knew I loved you, I had confidence in that you loved me as well and you wanted to spend the rest of your life with me, whether I was a doctor or not. That had nothing to do with you wanting to spend the rest of your life with me. That gives me a tremendous amount of confidence And it gives me confidence every single day that I can go face whatever giants I feel like God has called me to face, knowing that even if I take a loss, you don't see me as a failure. You see me as the victor through Christ every time. That's a tremendous amount of confidence.
That's going to resonate with a lot of people because I think sometimes men, and when they're approaching marriage and they're getting to that place when they feel like they have to present stability and they can't be taking, they can't be in the middle of a risk or something that might not look or appear stable. But to couples and to people that are evaluating that and whether they're ready to take the next step, stability is in the foundation of your relationship. It's not in the job. It's not because jobs can come and go, homes can come and go. All of that stuff is fleeting.
It's the arrogant leader that feels like they can control everything and that they can earn your love. And I don't think you ever want to be in a position where you're having to earn your spouse's love or you're having to earn your children's love. You don't want your children to feel like they have to earn your love. You don't have to earn Jesus's love. Jesus loves you, regardless of whether you love him or not. He loves you. That's unconditional love. You can have a tremendous amount of confidence in that. So when you understand that Jesus loves you unconditionally, and then you start showing that type of unconditional love to everybody around you, I think it gives you a tremendous amount of confidence. And the difference between confidence in that love versus arrogance of feeling like you have to earn that love, arrogance makes you think that I can do certain things to earn that love when you can't. You have to be confident that your spouse loves you for who you are, not because your wins and your losses. And a good way to figure out if you are crossing into arrogance whenever you're talking about dealing with your spouse is how many of your losses does your spouse know about? If I go and ask your spouse today, hey, Stephanie, what are some of the losses Trevor's faced recently? I mean, we don't always win. We're not all undefeated. Only Jesus was undefeated. But Stephanie, what are some losses that Trevor's taken? I had a friend today from church text me, just said, hey, God put you and Stephanie and the family on my heart to pray for y'all. And I did tell him, hey, professionally, we are facing some pretty tough times right now, some very challenging times that are stretching both Stephanie and myself and all facets of it. But thank God that our home life, like I have confidence in our home life. I have confidence in that stability. And Stephanie knows my losses because we share them. But now my friend from church, who's a yielded man with me, he knows a little bit of my losses too. And that vulnerability allows him to pray for me. And that gives me confidence that I've got a whole team of yielded Christians behind me, supporting me and supporting us and praying for us because they know why we're doing all of this is to try to make other lives better. That gives me confidence.
I love that. But we also have to be confident in the church and the people that are around us to be vulnerable in them or vulnerable with them. I hear so many times where people will not band together and seek mentorship and guidance from the church because they're afraid of looking a certain way. They feel like they have to look a certain way because they're churched. It's like the church is for the broken. The church is a hospital, and God has placed all of us together to all carry each other during different seasons. So I love that you have a yielded mentor at church that just seeks you out, and you'll do the same thing for someone else tomorrow
Absolutely.
or the next week. And just, we need that. We thrive on that. So be confident in the people that God has surrounded you with. Be confident in your vulnerability with them, that they will steward your vulnerability well. And so I think, bringing your team around you, it takes some of this discernment too. I want to make sure that when I'm seeking mentorship, I am going to evaluate the fruit that they bear.
Mm-hmm.
So when I want to look at other Christian couples, married couples, even just dating couples, I want to look at the fruit that they're bearing and say, I think this is an incredible mentor. This is someone that I want to glean from, and I can seek wisdom from them. Same professionally, we need professional mentors. And so you run them through that lens, really, of do they have a team of people? Do they have a big support system around them? That's a great sign of a confident leader.
Well, and think about it from a teaching aspect too, though. If you have somebody that is mentoring you, who are you mentoring? And how do you mentor somebody confidently but not arrogantly? Steph, you were a teacher for a long time. So I think you epitomized this for a very long time during your teaching career. I would love to hear how you as a teacher have to present yourself with confidence but not arrogance. What happens whenever you present yourself with arrogance to a student?
Well, one, they see right through it. Kids are
Mm-hmm.
smarter than you give them credit for. Adults constantly undermine children. And that's your number one mistake when you're going to lead them educationally, because you're also leading them personally, emotionally, mentally. And so being a vulnerable adult who's wise in their subject area, you know what you're talking about. But in teaching, it's always a give and take. And when my kids would realize something that I didn't, or they would call me out, they love to call me out on my grammatical errors. I was an English teacher and my students were extremely intelligent. And when they would call me out on, oh, you forgot a comma there. And I was like, thank you so much. I was like,
Yeah.
how dare you, critique your teacher or, how put them in their place. We had mutual respect for one another because I never presented myself as being perfect. I am here. I am well-versed in subject matter, but this is a collaborative approach. Yes, I have authority over you, but it's not dictatorship authority.
Yeah.
It's leading people where you want them to go because you want them to grow in that. You want them to love your subject matter. And so when you are responsible for teaching someone something that you have to lead confidently and not arrogantly.
When you realize whenever you lead confidently, that means you are a continuous learner. Whenever I'm teaching medical students at the clinic and at the hospital, I always tell them, don't assume that everything I'm saying is number one, accurate, or number two, completely up to date. This may be a topic that I haven't looked up for 4 years, and maybe I'm practicing the way I was taught 4 years ago, but go look it up. And if there's better information, if I'm wrong and there's a better way to manage this, let me know. You have to have confidence to be able to say, hey, teach me. I know I'm supposed to be teaching you, but you go look things up. And if you feel like what I said was not exactly up to date, let me know. And I also think whenever I'm trying to discern between what people to surround myself with emotionally, spiritually, and professionally, I look at my mentors and how many times they say, I don't know. The more times they say, I don't know, the more I respect them. I'm always very cautious of a doctor who's never said, I don't know, because there is no way anybody knows everything. So you should have a doctor that every now and then says, I don't really know. I'm not sure. Maybe I've got some ideas, but I don't have the answer today. I'm going to try to figure out the answer, but I don't have the answer right now. And I think of some of the physicians that have taught me and the business leaders that I look up to in a mentorship way, and how many times I've asked them for advice about certain very unique situations, and they've never been in that situation. And they're like, you know what, Trevor, I don't really know. I'd have to think through that. And whenever they say that, that to me tells me, yes, this is the right person in my life that I should be yielding and gleaming from. Because if they never say, I don't know, then they're full of it.
Yeah.
And they're just making it up. And then you don't know when are they making it up and when are they really confident. I want someone to be honest with me. Give me a confident response when you can.
Yeah.
You know, they are resources for you, but they don't have to be the answer to everything for you. That's an arrogant leader.
When you're surrounding yourself with mentors, I think it's most advantageous for you to seek people and glean from people who have gifts that are very different than yours. I know as a business leader, when I know I'm deficient in X, Y, and Z, there's some things in healthcare that I don't have a whole lot of experience with. So I'm going to hire someone with that experience. So when we're all sitting around a table, we all have different walks of life and experiences. So when we come together, we can all utilize our gifts together. I don't want clones of myself at work.
Confident leaders have a big, arrogant leaders are lone wolves. Arrogant leaders are trying to do it all by themselves because nobody else understands them. Nobody else knows it as well as they do. And nobody else can do it like they can do it. And that's not a good leader. That's an arrogant leader. And a submitted, confident leader understands that other people bring in their expertise and their experience, and you try to coalesce that large group together. And we're working on a deal right now, and I'm looking at all the leaders in this deal, and I'm realizing that, all right, there are certain areas where I may be more proficient at the business and the legal side of it. But there's certain areas that these other leaders have larger practices, and they're more proficient at understanding large organizations with large amounts of physicians. And I can't speak to that. I have to lean on their expertise. And it's really beautiful. I love it. It's like an orchestra, everybody playing together that brings their own expertise together. And at the end, you realize, man, two heads are better than one, three heads are better than two.
In marriage, an arrogant leader in a marriage, an arrogant spouse, tends to refuse help, advice, and counsel. These types of spouses are never wrong. It's never their fault. They're slow to apologize. And so it's kind of easy when you think about what we've discerned through arrogance and confidence. Now you can start piecing it into different areas of life. The same goes for a spouse. And if a spouse never takes fault for, their actions, that is arrogance. And so a confident spouse seeks the wisdom, resources, and Christian counseling. People need to be vulnerable.
That's probably one of the biggest characteristics of confidence versus arrogance is being vulnerable with your spouse. And then if you both need help communicating, being vulnerable to a Christian counselor.
You have to be willing to be under a microscope. And sometimes your spouse is your microscope, and you don't want to be seen by that. You have to break through those barriers. And sometimes it takes a third party to help shine light on those blind spots in your marriage. An objective third party. Now, this objective third party should never be other friends. When you've got marital divide, or you guys are working on something, no parent, in-law, friend, it's okay to seek help and guidance for things, but you never, back me up on this, we never air out our marital dirty laundry onto other people. No one should be really allowed into the intimacy of our inner workings other than a Christian counselor or someone third party and objective, because don't you find that people will use that ammo to take sides, and it gets messy, and then it creates divide between those spouses.
There's partisanship. I would say, as from a physician standpoint, and a lot of times trying to lead patients and leading couples even to counseling, I just have to make them aware that, hey, there's partisanship in your friends. There's partisanship in your family. That's just part of it. There's a whole history that they bring with them. Mm-hmm. So there is a tremendous amount of value that comes from what I'll always say, a nonpartisan third party whose role is not to take sides or to judge who's right or who's wrong. Really, their role is to be a nonpartisan bystander that facilitates communication and helps the two of you find how to communicate with each other effectively and constructively. That's what a fantastic counselor does. It's too much to ask of any family or friend member, because it really does take professional training to help two individuals work through that. And that's why Christian counseling is such a major, major asset to a Christian couple. The role of your family and your friends whenever you're going through some type of marital divide is not to ask them to judge your spouse.
Yeah.
It's to ask them for advice about what you're doing, not what the other person is doing. I think that's really the only advice you can kind of seek. It's not, hey, my brother's name's Stefan. Hey, Stefan, can you believe what Stephanie's doing? Isn't she wrong for doing that? That's an arrogant way to go about that disagreement that we're having. Really, the way would be, hey, Stefan, I'm having difficulty understanding this, or I'm having difficulty accepting this, or it's really striking a nerve or making me mad or frustrated. What do you think I could do or change in me? Why am I reacting in a way that I don't want to react? I think that's how a confident spouse enters some type of disagreement. And that's how you get good constructive feedback from your family and your friends. It's not about your spouse. It's about you.
That's so good.
Don't make it about your spouse whenever you're talking about your relationship issues with your family and friends. Make it about you and what you need to improve on.
I love it.
Don't sling dirt at each other.
Oh, yeah. No, because you're still, when you're going at it with that lens, you're still protecting your spouse. Mm-hmm. You're still preserving their dignity,
And it's a respect thing, that you respect your spouse enough to where you would not talk badly about them to somebody else.
Some other highlighted components of arrogance in a marriage. You see this a lot as a doctor. Arrogant couples that are not seeking resources, they're not trying to work on the marriage, they're not confident in the status of their marriage. They jump to poor coping mechanisms.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a huge identifier of arrogance when you have poor coping mechanisms.
Well, it's the substance abuse that I think after COVID has just exploded, and it stems from anxiety and depression and difficulty communicating with each other. And then you start seeing that the alcohol starts earlier, that the pours are heavier, or that you are having more and more drinks because you're trying to cope with that anxiety and that stress and that lack of communication between your spouse. And you're not reacting confidently to your own shortcomings and failures. You're acting arrogantly to that. And that leads you to kind of numb yourself to your own shortcomings. I think a lot of people that struggle with substance abuse, whenever I'm talking to a lot of patients about this and they're overindulging in alcohol or other types of substances, it's because they're trying to numb the stress, the anxiety, and the depression that they are feeling. If you address that from a confident perspective, then there's a vulnerability that says, I have a problem here and I need to attack that problem and I need to treat that problem. The arrogant way to view that is to ignore that you have a problem. I mean, they say this in AA all the time. The very first step is admitting you have a problem. Whenever I send somebody to a counselor won't contact them. The counselor makes them contact the counselor because the counselor says the first step is saying, I need to talk to a counselor. If you can't admit that you need help, then you're still living in that arrogant denial. And it is a very, very ugly spin cycle that spins out of control and can get very ugly and very messy and very tragic very quickly.
Yeah, well, a lot of couples need to realize, though, and people that have been married for a long time, that there are going to be outward forces that change the dynamic of your marriage. COVID was one of them where it was global. It changed the dynamic of a lot of marriages. And so there's always going to be something that's going to try to disrupt the dynamic of your marriage. And you guys have to be prepared and galvanized on how we're going to cope through these difficult things. Mm-hmm. Illness, death, epidemics, pandemics.
The things that happen in life.
Yes.
That are going to happen in life.
Yeah. You've got to be prepared. So that's why, when you're poured into a church, in the good times, you are building up your wisdom. You're building up the group of people around you. So when things happen, when the dynamic shifts, when some outward force affects your marriage, yes, you have an arsenal of resources, people, mentors, guidance to lean on. And so retroactively reaching that, it's possible, but it makes it harder. And so we're trying to help promote seeking that counsel now, seek mentorship, guidance and wisdom from people before it gets bad.
Well, and I think being in church on a weekly basis, it's like every single week I'm getting a lecture in a good way, not a bad lecture, but a constructive lecture that's going to make me a better person.
It's teaching. Yeah.
Yeah, it's teaching. Exactly. I'm learning my shortfalls. I'm learning how I can be a better spouse, how I can be a better father, how I can be a better colleague, ultimately how I can follow Christ in a more Christ-like way. Mm-hmm. And I'm surrounding myself with relationships of people that are on that same journey. And you're spending 2 to 3 hours a week amongst the church family, amongst people that are yielded and going in the same direction. And you're getting that weekly instruction on how you can face the highs and the lows of every week. I mean, just this past week, we had 2 incredible highs that professionally were achievements that we've never achieved before. And then an incredible professional low that was extremely hard to work through, that we're still working through. I can't imagine going through that without having the stability of what being a Christian and having the joy that being a Christian brings you, because you're happy and you're sad, and sometimes you're happy and sad all in the same day. But you can be confident that Jesus has your back, and that brings you joy. Confident couples are confident that God has brought them together for the long haul, for the duration of their life. Like death do us part really is death do us part. So I don't think confident couples ever use the divorce word.
No.
I think anytime anybody enters the D word into any type of disagreement, I think that's a very arrogant move. It's almost like saying,
it's a threat.
It is a threat. And it's an arrogant threat of almost saying, hey, if you really keep pushing me on this, I don't have to be with you. That's an arrogant attitude to have. I've never had a moment where I thought that divorce would be the best option or that would be an option that I would want. To me, that's always the enemy. That's the ultimate enemy in our relationship is divorce. And I don't even really want to think about it. I'm confident in who God has called us to be together and how we continue to communicate with each other.
Well, we've built an arsenal of resources to combat our differences.
And we have a lot of differences.
Yes.
I mean, we are two different types of people.
Very
We're not the
different people.
same person at
Very.
all. We always give that as an example of how we're complementary. That's why we make each other whole, is that my weaknesses are your strengths and your weaknesses are my strengths.
To sum up, we've talked about, professional and marital arrogance and confidence. I think there's a KPI that fits both of these categories. I think the KPI would be to evaluate as a leader or evaluate as a spouse, how many mentors are in your circle? How many people are on your team?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm like, ooh, I don't have a whole lot of people on my team.
Yeah, what does my roster look like?
Yeah, what does my team roster look like? And I'm like, okay, it looks a little bleak. What have I been trying to navigate by myself? What are we trying to navigate alone? So it's time to build your team.
Yeah. Life is like the Ryder Cup. It's team golf. It's not individual golf. It's team golf.
I love the Ryder Cup. I love team golf.
I love team golf too. Character that develops from team sports.
Team sports, it's different.
Working with other athletes and multiple personalities that are out there on the field. There's so much that can be learned from that.
Yeah. Well, in parenting, you have to be a confident parent, not an arrogant parent. And so kind of the same way that I approach children as a teacher, I am definitely your parent. This is my role. I am taking that authoritative approach. But one, I'm not going to portray false perfection. We talked about that last week. But a confident parent is not trying to live out their own failures on their kids. I am not going to push my girls. I gave up on dance too early, and I wish I never would have. So I'm not going to push my daughters into dance or into a sport that is not the best for them. I want to be confident in letting my kids explore sports. I want them, there's a level of commitment. I believe in commitment. When you sign up for a sport, you try it out, and that might be an entire season. So, you don't quit mid-season. Once you commit, you commit. But letting your kids explore things that they are passionate about, because they are uniquely designed by God. They're not your clone. They've got a lot of similarities to you, but their gifts are different. And so I think a confident parent is willing to explore the gifts and opportunities that God has put into their kids that are separate from my own gifts and my own abilities and dreams. What do you think?
Yeah, I think a Godfident parent and a confident parent does not try to live out their own dreams that they failed at. They realize that their kids are, number one, they're God's kids. Number two, they've been entrusted to us, but they have their own unique giftedness. And that may be that they are just as good at football as you are, or that may be that they're terrible at football, but they're really good at baseball, and you are never good at baseball. But I think it's allowing them to experience different things that are uniquely interesting to them, and that you're supporting them and trying those things out, and that you're not trying to live out and push out your own dreams, but you're trying to help guide them to explore their own dreams. That's what a confident parent does.
Yeah, you guide their future. You don't control it. As a teacher, it would really mess me up when I taught 8th grade for the longest time. So I'm just going to talk about my 8th grade parents. I love my parents. They were amazing and very supportive. But the ones that approached me with
disclosure here,
it was very interesting to experience so many parents of, well, she's got to be a doctor or a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the only two routes. If she's not that, maybe an engineer. And I'm like, okay, one, she loves art. Where are you going to put that into place? So there were so many parents trying to control the career path of their kids. And I want to build up. Kids should explore all the things, and STEM is a beautiful program. And, but there's dynamic in their learning, and they should explore all avenues. And so I think an arrogant parent really feels like I have control over my kid's future so severely that I'm going to select your college. I'm going to give you, or just a small pool to choose from, and a small pool of careers to choose from. That's really limiting to your kid's gifts.
And I think a recurring theme that I'm seeing is that an arrogant leader, parent, spouse keeps score. They are constantly playing the comparison game because they want their kid to get into that university and they want them to select that career path because it's all about showing other parents, look how successful I am. My kid went to that university that your kid couldn't get into. My dad was a very successful doctor and very important in our community, and he never pushed us to go into medicine. Whenever his friends would ask, because he had two sons that both ended up becoming doctors and both ended up becoming family doctors just like he did. He had other friends that asked him, how did you convince your sons to become doctors? And my dad would laugh and say, why would I ever convince my kids to be a doctor? Being a doctor is so hard that if you want to be a doctor, it's got to be because you want to be a doctor. And I knew plenty of people in medical school whose parents pushed them into medical school. They were done in 3 months. They didn't want to do it. Their parents wanted them to do it. And it's way too hard to go into if you don't have a love and a passion for it. So instead of us trying to push our kids into certain types of professions, what my dad always wanted to do was support us and drive in us a sense of ownership and excellence in what we did. He didn't care if I wanted to be a doctor or a psychologist or an attorney or an artist. He just cared that whatever I did, I put everything that I had, my heart and soul into it to try to achieve excellence in what I was called to do. But it wasn't because my dad pushed me to medicine.
I have the exact same career path story too, because my mom was a brilliant educator in Mesquite ISD. I mean, won awards, teacher of the year. My mom was amazing at what she did in teaching, but she never pushed me to be a teacher. My parents were always seeking high achievement for me. They wanted me to, be a high achiever. And so it's so funny. 2 careers later, I ended up being a teacher. And it was like, I still found it, but they let me find it on my own.
And so then 3 careers later became an executive.
I know. Well,
a woman of very many talents.
Listen, all the career paths that I've had in my life were all threads of the making of who I am now. And my teaching career comes into my career now. I'm more nurturing towards patients and staff because of my educational background. And my advertising and my marketing, all of that comes into play. So every walking journey that we go through builds us into the person that we are today. So I never apologize for being a career changer.
But no, that brings up a good point, because I think a confident leader embraces where God has them at that time. I remember working at the rec center at college, which is where you and I met. So that was the best thing that came out of it. But I also see myself as an 18-year-old guy that just graduated from high school, and the maturity that I went through in 4 years working at the student rec center while I was in college and transforming me into managing other people. And I realized that if it would not have been for that job where, 2 years is just working at the rec center and then 2 years being a manager at the rec center, I would not have been as successful as I am owning and managing multiple practices.
I love that.
And it was whenever I was 19 and 20 years old, understanding that, sure, I may be making $10 an hour, but I'm going to own the responsibility that's been placed on me and do that to the best of my ability, that prepared me to have larger responsibilities 10, 15 years later.
Absolutely. A confident, submitted leader blooms where they're planted.
Yes. Arrogant leader tears down where they're at because they feel like they're too important to be in this position.
Yep.
But a confident leader owns the position that they are in,
ownership,
makes it the best that they possibly can, and then they continue to obtain those other positions that they probably couldn't even dream of obtaining.
It's true.
So teach your kids to follow what God's plan is for them and support them. Don't live out your dreams through them. Help them to live out their dreams as you cheer from the sidelines.
I love it.
Prepare them as much as you possibly can and support them.
I love it. So an arrogant leader, parent or spouse, is a my way or the highway. There's no room for change or vulnerability, and they have a closed door policy. A confident leader listens, seeks wisdom and mentorship, submits to those with experience and gifts, allows themselves to be mentored, and they celebrate others and recognize others' achievements.
celebrating others, being vulnerable to your own faults, but also celebrating others. Whenever you get the spotlight, who can I celebrate that has helped me get to this point or helps me on a day-to-day basis? When you have that platform, use that platform to give somebody else that platform. Share your platform.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Submissive Leadership. Please follow us on our Spotify channel, on YouTube, and on Instagram.